I was never supposed to be a mother. That was something I had quietly accepted somewhere between my second miscarriage and the final phone call from my doctor. They said the words gently, like soft tissue paper around a broken thing. "I'm sorry, it's unlikely you'll be able to carry a child to term." I nodded, I smiled. I walked to my car and cried for a long time in the parking lot. Not loud sobs, just silent tears, the kind that come from a place deeper than grief. For a while, I stopped dreaming of lullabies and tiny shoes. I filled my life with work, with books, with quiet evenings and safe routines. Friends said I was strong, but really I was just numb. And then one day, out of nowhere, I found myself standing outside a local adoption agency. I didn't even remember driving there. Just something pulled me. I went inside, spoke to a kind woman named Martha. She asked me questions, handed me forms, and gave me a folder with pictures of children in need of a home. I looked through dozens, smiling faces, blank expressions, eyes full of hope, or none at all. Then I turned a page and froze. A boy, 8 years old, dark hair, big brown eyes, no smile, just a quiet, guarded stare. His name was Daniel, and below his photo, scribbled in small print, were 5 words I'll never forget: multiple failed adoptions, behavioral issues. I asked Martha about him. She sighed. "He's been through a lot, in and out of homes, never bonded well. Most families, they give up." I stared at that photo for a long time. Something about him, the loneliness in his eyes, the way he seemed to already know disappointment. I whispered, "I want to meet him." Martha blinked. "Are you sure? He doesn't warm up easily." "I'm not looking for easy," I said. "I'm looking for real." The first time I met Daniel, he didn't speak. He sat across from me in a room full of plastic chairs and coloring books, arms crossed, eyes darting to the clock. I tried asking about school. He shrugged. I asked if he liked video games. He looked away, but then I pulled out a tiny toy car, just a simple red Matchbox car I had in my purse, left over from a friend's son. I slid it across the table, and for the first time, and Daniel reached out. He didn't smile, but he looked at me, he really looked at me. And in that moment, I knew. The adoption process wasn't smooth. There were tantrums, silent treatments, nights he cried in his room and refused to say why. But I stayed, not because it was easy, but because I saw in him what no one else stayed long enough to see: a heart guarded by pain, a boy who learned to protect himself by never needing anyone. And slowly, piece by piece, he let me in. One night, months after the papers were finalized, Daniel stood at the edge of my bedroom door. "Mom?" he whispered. I sat up, startled. It was the first time he ever called me that. He walked over and held out the red toy car. "I didn't say thank you," he said, "for choosing me." I took it, tears in my eyes. "You never had to." I didn't know then that 15 years later, that boy, now a man, would be the one to save me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Raising Daniel was like learning a new language, one built on patience, observation, and unconditional love. He didn't come with instructions. No child does. But he also didn't come with trust. That had been broken long before I showed up. The first year was filled with small victories. He let me sit next to him on the couch. He started laughing at cartoons again. He called me Mom without hesitation. And once, just once, he ran into my arms after a nightmare. I held him so tight I thought I might break. We had our own little rhythms: Saturday pancakes, evening walks, building puzzles on rainy days. He still had tantrums sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. But I never raised my voice, I just waited. One time he screamed, "You're just gonna leave too." I knelt beside him and said, "I'm not going anywhere, even if you yell, even if you cry, I'm still your mom." He didn't believe me at first, but eventually he started to. By the time Daniel was 12, he had transformed, still quiet, still guarded with strangers. But at home, he was funny, clever, loyal to the core. I caught glimpses of who he could become, and it made every hard moment worth it. He'd leave little notes in my purse. "Hope your day is nice," or drawings of us holding hands under a tree. And once on my birthday, he cooked scrambled eggs and toast all by himself. They were burnt, but they were perfect. Then came the teenage years. It happened gradually, like a tide shifting. He stopped coming out for pancakes, stopped talking about school, stopped laughing at our old inside jokes. At first, I thought he was just growing up, but then the silence turned sharp. I'd ask how his day was. Fine. I'd offer to drive him to practice. Don't bother. I'd wait up for him at night, and he'd slip in past curfew, pretending not to notice. One evening, I confronted him. Daniel, what's going on? He shrugged. Nothing. You barely talk to me anymore. Did I do something? He looked at me with this strange mix of anger and hurt. You didn't do anything. You just don't get it. Get what? He snapped. I'm not your real son. Why do you keep pretending like I am? It felt like he had slapped me. Not because of what he said, but because I knew deep down he still believed it. That somewhere inside said he thought he wasn't worth keeping. I didn't cry until after he slammed the door. I sat on the kitchen floor holding the red toy car he'd given me years ago, and I whispered, "You are mine, whether you believe it or not." In the months that followed, the gap between us grew. He spent more time with friends I didn't know. His grades dropped. He stopped coming home some nights altogether. I tried grounding him, talking to him, even begged him to see a counselor. Nothing worked. Then one day, he packed a bag. He was 17. I'm moving in with a friend, he said flatly. I'm done pretending this is working. I stood in the doorway, shaking. Daniel, please, talk to me. He wouldn't look at me. And then he left. No hug, no goodbye. Just the sound of the front door closing. I sat in the hallway for hours. I wanted to scream, to chase after him, to make him understand how much I loved him. But I didn't. I knew love wasn't about control. Sometimes love means letting go, even when it breaks you. For the next 2 years, I barely heard from him. A text here, a single Merry Christmas, silence on my birthday. And I held on to every tiny thread like it was gold, because even when he was gone, he was still my son. There's a different kind of silence that fills a house when someone leaves it angry. It's not peaceful, it doesn't rest, it lingers in the hallways like dust on shelves. You barely notice it at first, but it settles over everything. That's how my home felt after Daniel left. Empty but not quiet. Still but never calm. At first I tried to stay busy. I cleaned his room every Sunday as if he might come back at any moment. I kept the light on in the hallway at night. Habit maybe, or hope. Sometimes I'd sit in his doorway, holding that red toy car, and whisper to no one, "You're still mine. I don't care how long it takes. I'll be here." I sent texts every few weeks. Just checking in, hope you're safe. Thinking of you, always. I miss your smile today. Most went unanswered. Some were read. One time he replied, "I'm fine, don't worry." I cried over those 2 words like they were a poem. Time passed, seasons changed, and somewhere in all that space between us, the years began to bend. He turned 18, then 19. I didn't know where he was living, didn't know if he was studying, working, eating. I prayed over his name every night, sometimes out loud, sometimes just in my heart. God, I don't need a miracle. Just let him know he's still loved. One afternoon, I saw someone who looked like him across the street. Same build, same walk, same way of tucking his hands into his hoodie. My heart leapt, but when he turned, it wasn't him. I smiled anyway, because just for a moment, it felt like Daniel was close. Around that time, I started to fall apart in my own way. I'd ignored the fatigue for months, the shortness of breath, the dizzy spells. I thought it was just stress, grief wearing a different mask, but one morning I collapsed at the grocery store. They called an ambulance. In the hospital, after scans and questions, a young doctor sat beside my bed and said gently, "We found a mass in your chest. We need to run more tests, but it looks serious." Everything after that felt muffled, like I was underwater, like the world had pressed pause. I didn't tell anyone for a while. I didn't want pity, didn't want the awkward phone calls, but mostly, I didn't want Daniel to know. Not like this, not after years of silence. But one night, in a moment of weakness or maybe faith, I texted him. Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'd love to see you. No pressure, just if you ever feel ready. I didn't mention the hospital or the diagnosis or how scared I was. I just waited. The message stayed unread for 2 days, then 3, then a week, and I told myself it was okay, that I had lived long enough to love him the best I could, even from a distance. But love doesn't always stay silent forever, because one morning as I lay in that hospital bed, the nurse knocked softly. "There's a young man here to see you," she said. "He says his name is Daniel." When the nurse said his name, I thought I misheard her. "Daniel? My Daniel?" I sat up too quickly and felt the IV tug at my arm. The room spun just for a second, and then the door opened, and there he was. He stood in the doorway, taller, broader, older. His hair was longer than I remembered. He wore a black hoodie and jeans, but his eyes, those big brown eyes I had memorized years ago, they hadn't changed. Still guarded, still deep, but softer now. He took one step in and another, and then, without a word, he walked straight to my bedside and sat down. We just looked at each other, no hug, no tears, just two people who had missed so many years sitting in the same quiet for the first time. Finally, I broke the silence. "You came." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said. I blinked. "How did you—" He held up his phone. "I got your message. I ignored it at first, but then I saw a post. Someone from the neighborhood mentioned a woman getting rushed to the hospital. It sounded like you." He paused. "I called the hospital, asked if you were here. I didn't expect them to say yes." I tried to smile, but my throat tightened. "I didn't want to guilt you into coming," I said. "I just wanted you to know the door was still open." He looked down at his hands. "I know I left, and I said things I didn't mean. Things I regret." "You were hurting," I said gently. He met my eyes again. "So were you." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And then, like a dam finally giving way, he reached out and held my hand. "I don't know how to fix everything," he whispered, "but I want to be here now, if that's okay." My voice broke. "It's more than okay. It's all I ever hoped for." In the days that followed, Daniel visited every morning. He brought flowers from the farmer's market, snuck in real coffee when hospital brews tasted like cardboard, sat beside me reading old books we used to love, ones I hadn't touched in years. Sometimes we talked about the past, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just sat in silence, letting the years between us fill with something softer. One evening, I woke from a nap and found him asleep in the chair by my bed, arms crossed, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. And I realized this was the boy who once ran away because he didn't believe anyone could love him enough to stay. And now he was here by choice, by heart. On my 5th day in the hospital, the doctor came in. "The tests came back," he said. Daniel stood beside me, hand resting gently on mine. The doctor smiled. "It's treatable. We'll need surgery and maybe some radiation, but your chances are very good." I exhaled slowly, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt to breathe. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Guess I showed up just in time," he whispered. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the moment I first saw his photo in that folder. That unsmiling little boy with too much pain in his eyes. And now that this man sitting beside me, watching over me, he had saved me. Not just from illness, but from loneliness, from giving up, from forgetting that sometimes love takes the long road home. Recovery wasn't easy. There were long days, tired mornings, and nights where fear still crept in when the lights went out. But through it all, Daniel stayed. He drove me to appointments, picked up prescriptions, even learned how to make my favorite soup, though he burned it the first 2 times. And every time I told him he didn't have to do all this, he gave the same answer. "You did it for me first." One day after a radiation session, we sat in the car outside the hospital, watching the rain hit the windshield. Daniel turned to me and said, "Do you remember the red toy car?" I smiled. "I kept it all these years." He nodded slowly. "I found one just like it the other day. Bought it. It reminded me that no matter how far I went, you never stopped showing up." I looked at him, heart full. "You came back. That's what matters." Later that week, I went into his old room, now turned into a kind of guest space, but seeing it lit again with his jacket draped over the chair, it felt like home had taken a breath for the first time in years. I saw a notebook on the desk. Curious, I peeked inside. It was filled with sketches, drawings of children, story ideas, a dream written in bold pencil at the top of one page. Start a nonprofit for foster youth. Help them find real homes. I stood there for a long moment, overwhelmed with a mixture of pride and awe. He hadn't just come back to me, he was becoming someone who would help others just like him. That weekend, we sat on the back porch. Birds chirped. The world felt still. He turned to me. "Do you ever wonder if things could have been different?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. If I'd given birth to a child, maybe my life would have followed a smoother path. Maybe I would have been spared a lot of tears. I smiled softly. But I wouldn't have known you, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. He swallowed hard. "You were the first person who stayed. I didn't know how to handle that at first." "You don't have to explain," I said. "You were a child surviving the only way you knew how." Later that night, he sat at the kitchen table helping me fold laundry. He held up a shirt and smiled. "This one's older than me." I laughed. "It might be." He paused, then looked at me. "I'm thinking of going back to school, maybe social work or counseling." "That's perfect," I said, beaming. He leaned back in the chair. "I want to be someone kids can trust, the way I learned to trust you." It was in that moment, quiet and ordinary, that I realized something. This was the ending I never expected. Not a perfect one, but real, earned, holy in its own way. Daniel had once been a boy no one wanted, a file in a folder, a case they thought would never close. But someone took a chance, I took a chance, and now he was a man with purpose, with compassion, with love in his bones. And me? I had been broken, empty, grieving a life I thought I'd never get to live. But life and love had found its way to me anyway. Full circle, I whispered to myself that night, placing the red toy car gently back on the shelf. People often ask me if I regret not having a biological child, if I miss the experience, the baby showers, the family resemblances, the first steps. And the truth is, no, not even for a moment. Because motherhood, I've learned, is not about blood. It's about staying, about choosing someone again and again, even when they don't choose you back right away. It's about believing in a future they can't yet see, and holding space until they grow into it. Daniel never became someone I raised. He became someone I walked beside. Through fear, through rebellion, through silence, through return. We built something real, something no paperwork or title could define. He calls me Mom now, not out of habit, but out of truth. 2 years after my treatment ended, Daniel launched his nonprofit. He called it Second Light, a place where older foster kids, the ones often left behind, could get mentorship, education, and a safe place to land. I attended the launch event in a simple navy dress, sat in the front row. When Daniel took the stage, he looked out at the crowd, then directly at me. He told the story of the red toy car, of how it started with a sandwich, a quiet woman who didn't give up, and a boy who didn't know how to be loved, until someone showed him. He ended his speech with this: "The woman who adopted me didn't save me. She saw me, and because she did, I learned to see others too." Afterward, he walked off stage, straight to me, and hugged me, in front of everyone. No hesitation. I held him like I had when he was 8, but this time, he held me back just as tightly. Now, when I sit by my window in the quiet of morning, I sometimes think about the day I walked into that adoption agency, how unprepared I felt, how afraid. I think about the photos in that folder, about the little boy who didn't smile, and how I somehow knew he was mine. The house still creaks in the same places, the hallway still glows with the same soft light. But the silence now, it feels different. It's the silence of peace, and the kind that follows healing, the kind that comes when the story has come full circle. Daniel visits every Sunday now, brings groceries, asks for recipes, fixes leaky faucets. He still rolls his eyes when I hug him too long. But he never pulls away. He's even dating someone. She's kind, grounded, and patient, just like I imagine his mother might have been if life had taken a different path. But life didn't, and I'm so thankful for the one we've had. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if and I had chosen a different photo in that folder. If I had walked away from the challenge, I would have missed out on the hardest years of my life, but also the most sacred ones, because love, real love, doesn't always come easy. It comes slow, it comes tested, it comes when you least expect it, and it stays when everything else falls away. And when people ask me now if I ever had children, I smile and say, yes, I have a son. And one day he saved my life because I saw him when no one else did. And in the end, he saw me too.